All right, so today we're diving deep into the escalating tensions between the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia.
Yeah.
Really unpacking this recent U.S. decision to allow Ukraine to use American long-range missiles to
Right.
hit targets inside Russia.
Right.
And this has sparked debate and raised some serious questions.
It's fun.
To navigate this complex landscape, we've got some interesting sources for this deep dive.
Okay.
News articles, yeah, but also audio clips from Israeli media outlets, which offer a unique perspective on the conflict.
Very interesting, yeah.
It's the 1,000th day of the Russia-Ukraine war, so it's quite a milestone.
It is.
And it's right before Donald Trump, who promised to end this war quickly, takes office.
It's hard not to see this decision as a significant move by the outgoing Biden administration.
Yeah, definitely adds another layer to things. And it raises the question, what's the real motivation here?
Yeah.
Is it to support Ukraine in these final days? Or is it a political calculation, maybe trying to tie the hands of the incoming administration?
Could be both, right? It's worth thinking about both,
Yeah.
but for sure there will be an immediate military impact.
Uh-huh.
The U.S. lifting the restriction on using these ATACMS missiles, long-range and guided, well, it's a significant escalation.
Yeah.
And these aren't just any missiles. They cost $1.5 million each.
Wow, that price tag, huh?
Yeah.
That really shows how much the U.S. has invested in this.
For sure.
So, beyond the cost, what makes these ATACMS so strategically important?
Range. That's the key.
Okay.
Up to 300 kilometers, they can hit targets that far away.
Wow.
So Ukraine can strike deep inside Russian territory.
I see.
Supply lines, air bases, command centers,
Wow.
essentially disrupting Russia's war machine.
So a game changer, maybe, for Ukraine.
Potentially, yes. But it's not that simple.
Okay.
While some see this as a turning point, some U.S. officials have doubts.
Oh, really?
They argue that the number of missiles isn't enough to shift the balance of power.
Right.
Plus, Russia has adapted its tactics throughout the war, and it has a vast territory.
So it all hinges on how Ukraine uses them and how Russia responds.
Precisely.
And speaking of Russia's response, it's been, well, anything but quiet.
To put it mildly.
They've accused the U.S. of escalating the conflict and pushing the world towards World War III. They've also made some unsettling statements about their nuclear doctrine.
Yeah, this is where things get concerning.
Okay.
Putin recently approved a change to Russia's nuclear doctrine.
Right.
It sent shockwaves, really.
I can imagine.
I mean, before, Russia's nuclear doctrine focused on retaliation if there was a nuclear attack.
Right.
This change, though, expands the potential use of nuclear weapons
Uh-huh.
to include scenarios where Russia faces a conventional attack that threatens its existence.
So they might use nukes even if they aren't attacked with nukes?
That's how they're framing it, and it's alarming.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider they're now pointing to the U.S. supplying Ukraine with these long-range missiles as a potential trigger. Any significant military support for Ukraine could be seen as an existential threat to Russia.
And a justification for a nuclear response.
Wow.
And on top of all this, there are reports of North Korea possibly sending troops to help Russia.
Yeah, it feels like a new axis of power forming.
It's a development that's definitely worrying the West.
Yeah.
Even if this alliance focuses on logistics and manpower.
Right.
It's a significant shift in the global power balance.
And with Russia changing its nuclear doctrine, it's not just about conventional military force anymore.
Absolutely.
Adds a whole new level of risk and unpredictability.
It raises the stakes considerably.
Yeah.
They want the world to know they're not bluffing.
Right.
For example, Maria Butina, a Russian politician and a former spy, she said, these guys, the Biden administration, are trying to bring the situation to maximum escalation while they're still in power.
Wow. So they're saying the U.S. is deliberately provoking them?
Pretty much.
But what about Ukraine? They haven't confirmed using these missiles in Russia, right?
Yeah. There have been reports about an attack on a weapons depot in Bryansk, deep inside Russia. But Ukraine hasn't claimed responsibility or said they used the ATACMS.
Not officially, no.
But Bryansk is about 115 kilometers from the border, well within range of the missiles.
Right.
And this attack happened before the U.S. officially lifted the ban.
Yeah, that timing is curious.
It raises questions about how much the U.S. and Ukraine are coordinating.
For sure.
Was Ukraine given the okay to use the missiles before the announcement?
Maybe.
Was it a way to test the waters and see how Russia reacts?
It's possible.
It adds a layer of intrigue to this complex situation.
For sure.
If there was an unofficial agreement,
Right.
It suggests the U.S. has played a more active role than they've said publicly.
That's true.
And makes you wonder about the timing of the announcement.
Yeah.
Was it delayed on purpose or just a response to what Ukraine did?
We'll be exploring these questions further as we go deeper into this.
Yeah.
There's a lot more going on beneath the surface than meets the eye.
All right, well, let's take a look.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we're watching this high-stakes chess match unfold, and every move could have huge consequences.
Right, and these Israeli sources, they're looking at this not just as U.S.-Russia relations, but also through the lens of what's happening in the Middle East.
Right, exactly.
And how this conflict could spread.
Yeah, it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
The Ukraine conflict isn't happening in isolation.
No.
There's all these global relationships and power dynamics. Some are even saying this is like a clash between the West, with the U.S. leading it, and a block of Russia, China, and maybe even North Korea.
That's a big division.
It is.
Makes you think, does the idea of a global order even mean anything anymore?
A lot of people are asking that question right now.
Yeah.
You know, for years after the Cold War, there was this feeling that we were all moving toward a more integrated system, a global order, with the U.S. at the center.
Right.
But now, with China rising, Russia coming back strong, regional powers getting more assertive, we're seeing a shift to a multipolar world.
Okay, so maybe explain those terms.
Right.
What does a multipolar world actually mean? How's it different from the global order we're used to?
It's like this. In a multipolar world, power isn't concentrated in one place, like with the U.S.
Right.
It's spread among several major players,
I see.
each with their own sphere of influence, interests, and vision for the future.
Okay.
It can create a more unpredictable international system.
Yeah.
More fragmented.
More potential for conflict.
Exactly. More competition.
Sounds kind of messy.
It can be.
Does this mean more conflict is inevitable? Or can there still be cooperation in this multipolar system?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
A multipolar world doesn't automatically equal constant conflict.
Okay.
This means the dynamics of power are way more complex.
Right.
There's room for both. Cooperation and competition. Depends how these major players interact.
So how they choose to play the game.
Exactly. The key will be establishing clear rules, finding common ground, building trust, even when there's competition.
But is trust even possible right now? Especially between the U.S. and Russia.
Right.
Their relationship seems worse than ever, and with all this talk about nuclear weapons, it's hard not to feel uneasy even being so far away.
It's a tense situation, definitely, and it's natural to feel concerned.
Yeah.
But we've seen throughout history that seemingly impossible conflicts do get resolved through diplomacy and talking.
So you're saying there's still hope for a peaceful end to this conflict?
Hope is essential, always.
Yeah.
But to get to peace, everyone involved has to make an effort.
Okay.
They need to be willing to listen to each other's concerns.
Right.
Find common ground and compromise.
So a nuanced approach.
Yes.
Not just picking sides or demonizing the other.
Exactly. We need to move past those simple narratives and acknowledge how complicated this is.
Yeah.
Both sides have real security concerns.
Right.
And those need to be addressed. We got to understand the history, the cultural differences, all the things that led to this.
So, like, zoom out and see the bigger picture. Not get lost in the day-to-day headlines. But even if we do that, de-escalate the immediate tensions, what about the long-term effects of this shift to a multipolar world?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
The world is changing. And the old rules might not apply anymore.
So what does this mean for everyday people?
Well,
how will this shift in power affect us?
We'll feel it in a lot of ways.
Right.
Global trade patterns might shift. The cost of goods might change.
Right.
Maybe even travel and movement could be affected.
Wow.
Our world is so interconnected.
Yeah.
What happens on one continent affects everyone.
It's like we're all part of this web.
Right.
Whether we realize it or not.
And the choices leaders make, the actions they take, ultimately affect us all.
And it's not just about what leaders do, right?
Yeah.
It's also about our choices as individuals.
Exactly.
In a world that feels chaotic and unpredictable. Yeah.
It's more important than ever to stay informed, talk to each other, and support those working towards peace.
Couldn't agree more.
And that's what makes these Israeli media sources so valuable. They're giving us a different perspective.
It's easy to get stuck in our own echo chambers.
Yeah.
Hearing only things that reinforce what we already think.
Right. We need to break out of those and hear different viewpoints.
Absolutely.
It helps us understand the world better and think more critically. So not just passively absorbing information, but being active, engaged, and critical.
Exactly. Asking questions, challenging assumptions, finding multiple sources to get the full picture.
Being more careful about what we consume, basically.
Yes, especially with all the misinformation and propaganda out there.
So, like, media literacy.
Exactly.
Not just reading headlines, but really digging deeper, analyzing sources, thinking about biases.
Yeah, it's crucial.
We need to become our own fact checkers, basically.
In a way, yes, especially with something as complex as this conflict in Ukraine. This deep dive is definitely making me think more carefully about how I process information and form my own opinions.
That's important.
There's so much more to this than what we see on the surface.
A lot more.
And the implications go way beyond the fighting.
Absolutely, and that's a key takeaway. The situation in Ukraine is like a miniature version of the big challenges humanity is facing in the 21st century.
That's interesting.
It shows us that we live in a complex, interconnected world.
Yeah.
And what we do, individually and together, has huge consequences.
So as we try to understand this changing world, what should we be paying attention to?
Wow.
What are some of the key insights from this deep dive so far?
Let's see.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in all the big picture stuff, geopolitics, the power shifts, but I keep coming back to the human stories at the heart of all this.
For sure.
The audio clips we have, they really bring that home.
They do.
Hearing about families struggling to survive the winter, communities torn apart by violence.
It's heartbreaking.
That constant fear.
Yeah.
It's hard to listen to.
It is important to remember that behind the headlines and the statistics, there are real people whose lives have been changed forever by this war.
Yeah.
The humanitarian crisis in Ukraine is just massive.
It is.
Millions of people have had to leave their homes.
It's hard to even grasp.
Some are seeking refuge in other countries.
Yeah.
Others are facing terrible conditions within Ukraine.
One of the audio clips mentioned an energy crisis in some regions on top of everything else.
Right.
Can you imagine?
It's hard to even imagine.
Trying to keep your family warm and safe in a freezing Ukrainian winter with little heat and electricity.
It's a heartbreaking reality for so many.
It is.
And the physical hardships are just one part of it.
Right.
There's the psychological trauma, too.
That's right.
The invisible wounds of war.
The constant fear.
The loss.
Yeah.
The disruption of normal life.
It's hard to come back from that.
It leaves lasting scars.
We can't forget about the human cost.
No, we can't.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all and wonder what we can even do.
But you made a good point earlier. Even small acts of kindness can make a difference.
Right. Every little bit helps.
Donating to organizations, volunteering our time,
raising awareness.
All of it.
All these things add up.
It shows solidarity with the Ukrainian people.
Yeah.
It reminds them they're not alone.
Exactly. And it's not just about helping Ukrainians directly.
Well,
it's about working towards a world where these conflicts are less likely to happen.
That's the long-term goal.
Yeah.
And it's a crucial one.
So how do we do that?
We have to address the root causes of conflict.
Okay, right.
Poverty, inequality, oppression.
Right.
We need to encourage dialogue, foster understanding between cultures.
Build bridges.
Instead of walls.
It's a shift in mindset.
It is.
Moving away from us versus them.
Yeah.
And recognizing our shared humanity.
That's cute.
If we want to solve these challenges,
right,
we need to find ways to cooperate.
Not just compete.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes.
I'm glad.
We went from talking about missiles to the big picture.
Yeah.
And then grappling with the human cost of war.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but it's important.
It is. And I think the main takeaway is that we can't just sit back and watch.
Right.
Whether it's staying informed, talking about these issues, supporting humanitarian work, or advocating for peace.
We all have a part to play.
Each of us can make a difference.
This conversation has definitely given me a lot to think about. I feel a sense of urgency, but also hope. Hope that we can learn from the past.
Absolutely.
Hope that we can choose cooperation over conflict.
I share that hope.
This is a crucial moment in history.
It is.
A time to think about our values.
Our priorities.
And our responsibility to the future.
Yes.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the U.S., Ukraine, Russia tensions.
Well, of course.
We hope you gained some valuable insights today.
And a deeper understanding of this complex situation.
We encourage you to keep learning about this.
To seek out different perspectives.
And think about what you can do to build a more peaceful world.
Remember, even small actions can have a big impact.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.